Hey, this is Erica from Educating, and this channel is teaching tips, tools, ideas, and resources for new college instructors, as well as advice more generally for academics and those in all ACT careers. Today I thought I'd talk about 5 different approaches to making sure that your students understand the main concepts of your course. There's different approaches to how you can test for understanding from your students. Do they understand the major class concepts? So if you're teaching, for example, a literature course, do they understand the literary terminology? If you're teaching a sociology course, do they understand the main theories? And so how can you test for understanding with your students? Here are a few approaches to try. The first option would just be to test your students via quizzes, perhaps, to see if they understand the definition of each of the concepts. So in my experience, you're better off asking for short answer questions versus doing like a multiple choice, for example, because a lot of times, yes, if there's multiple definitions and multiple concepts on the screen or on the page, they can match them up. But if you just gave them a term and asked them to define it, then like, okay, well, I need to see it in order to remember it. Right? So I think depending on how important it is that they can understand it and, articulate it without having it right in front of them. Personally, I think that if you do this approach, that short answer quizzes are the way to go. I recommend though that you take it to another level than just having them memorize definitions. And so another activity can be a scenario activity where you describe different scenarios to your students, and then they have to explain how the course concepts apply to that scenario, either how it's represented or how it can be applied to what is happening. So that can be a different approach, right? A scenario situation where maybe you have small groups, maybe you think pair shares, and in this case, you're gaining a better understanding of your students' knowledge of the concepts because they're actually able or not able to apply it to different scenarios. Taking it a step further, in the third idea, it's using real-world situations. So rather than just doing like the random scenario activity, you might have, hey, here are things that have been happening in the world as of this week or this month. How do the course concepts apply to these real-world situations? So in that way, again, you're testing that knowledge of your students, but you're also showing them how your class is relevant to the world around them. And so in this case, it's similar to the scenarios, but you're actually using what's happening in the world around them in order to test their knowledge. Now, so far, these activities have been quizzes or maybe discussions, think, pair, shares, etc. Another approach can be to have it be a small class activity. So maybe they're presenting their understanding or they're teaching a concept from the course. So perhaps each week they have to sign up for 1 week in which they're going to be in charge of teaching that concept to their classmates. And so they have a 5-minute presentation activity applying to these various concepts. And in that presentation, they have to define it, they have to give 2 to 3 examples of it in the real world, and they have to then answer questions from their classmates for a couple minutes as well. So in this case, it's a small activity, again, individual or as a group project, where they're actually presenting to their classmates, which again can have that push to gain a strong understanding of the concepts because they're teaching it to others soon enough. And then the 5th option is to have them annotate their assignments with these concepts in mind. So rather than having a separate activity for them, instead tell them, okay, well, when you turn in your first paper, you're going to annotate it. You're going to add comments maybe in a Word doc or in a Google Doc, where you're pointing out where different course concepts are coming into play in the research that you're doing, in the analysis that you're doing, in the summarizing of readings that you're doing, whatever the case may be, whatever you're assigning to your students. Throughout it, one element will be pointing out class concepts. And so again, you're testing their understanding of, are they seeing how all this interconnects? One way of knowing that is by having them annotate their work. So 5 different approaches, right, to figuring out if your students understand your course concepts. So again, the quizzes are very much like, can you just repeat a definition? I recommend going further down the line with either a scenario activity, especially a real-world scenario activity, and if not, then either the presentation or the annotation could be approaches, again, to testing your student knowledge. So I hope you found this helpful. Click like if you did, and subscribe if you don't want to miss out on future content. And feel free to comment with your own suggestions for how to test your students' knowledge of course concepts.